Hey there. It is Thursday, October 19th, and I have something going on there. Huh. It is story time, and we're going to read the story about Abigail becoming one of the women who belongs to David. And that's what we're talking about today. So hang tight and we'll get right to it. Okay, I am responding to someone in the chat. Okay, so hi, welcome. Hi, this is story time. I'm Dr. Bird. I'm a biblical scholar. I care about what people do with what they find in the Bible. I care about the way people read the Bible, the way they're taught to read it, the way they're taught to ignore certain things, the way they're taught to accommodate some of the awful stuff that's in there, or excuse it, justify it somehow. And in particular, right now, I'm interested in the way people use this Bible to talk about or justify certain forms of marriage, as in to assert that only heterosexuals are allowed. And I'm using in air quotes, but it's a legal thing, right? It's actually a thing that people are not allowed to do unless you're hetero. And that's not true. Obviously, marriages are allowed in the United States. Between same-sex people, but it's still a touchy issue, and it's still hard for a lot of people who were raised with a certain way of thinking about this topic. So one of the things that I touch on, there are basically, I think I came up with 12 takeaways instead of someone asked for what the takeaway is for my book. Well, the main takeaway for my book is that marriage in the Bible isn't anything like what marriages are like today. That's not really good enough. So I came up with like a list of 12, and one of the the points of the book, or one of the things that I talk about in the book that I think is important for people to think about, is that people today and over the centuries have been misinformed about human sexuality because of what's in the Bible. Not just misreading it, sometimes reading it very accurately, right? So the biblical texts themselves have taught people to be homophobic, to be afraid of non-hetero expressions of sexuality. And that's, it's tragic when you think about it, right? This is a basic element of human experience that people are being misinformed on, and it's connected to their sacred writings, so they believe it, and it's true, and that trumps actual human experience. And I understand where that person is coming from because I've been there. So I'm an educator. I'm interested in helping people learn what is going on in this Bible, and so that has that sparked this twice weekly live stream, reading through biblical passages that talk about sex or the relationship we call marriage, or any kind of interaction between people that is harmful, that involves intimate body parts. I'm doing this because there's just so much more in there than most people realize. So kind of as a way to highlight that, also as a way to say, yeah, I've looked through the Bible and I've I've considered all the pieces, right? And also as a way to talk back to it and to say, you know what, I reject that kind of thing. So anyway, so what we're doing today is not terribly sexy. It's not terribly juicy, but it is an interesting story in that, I'm just really frustrated with this element of the Hebrew Bible scriptures, at least, that so much is about fighting. So many of the stories are focused on or revolve around fighting, right? And I was reading through several of the chapters this morning or this afternoon, and I mean, even just the number of chapters that are devoted to Saul, who was king, being afraid of David for whatever reason, and I don't think it's ever really clear. I think he's just afraid of him. And I mean, there could be good reasons for that, but so many chapters about Saul trying to go capture David and kill him, and the threat on David's life. And it is stunning to me how many chapters are given to that. And it's like, and what is this that's helpful? Which part of this is sacred? Which part of this is something that we want to celebrate today and embrace? And do you know what I mean? Like, how is that helpful? That was the first king of this group of people called the Israelites. Like, and he's off his rocker, but he's got power and he's trying to kill his successor. Like, this isn't Game of Thrones, but it kind of is, you know? It's like, oh my God. Anyway, so, you know, I became a biblical scholar because I care about how these texts are used to direct people's lives. And so my intentions are about essentially pulling the veil back or informing people a bit better to be better informed about what is going on in here, and then you figure out what you want to do with it. But you know, it's unpleasant work, really, when at times I get tired of reading about all this fighting and antagonism, and it's unnecessary, you know. It's just so so hi. Just another day in the life, you know. All right, so I want to pick up I'm gonna pick up just a short passage here in chapter 23 of First Samuel, and then we'll scoot on over and read this engagement, this back and forth fighting thing that goes on, and which leads up to Abigail becoming one of David's women. So, any questions? Any comments? Aw, so fun to see you all here. And Captain Dadpool's here today, right? Caltastic, and considering it's her last time or their last time to be here live for a while. So it's really fun that you're here. Thanks everyone for being here. Okay, so I'm in chapter 23 of First Samuel. And you all know that this is a Christian labeling, right? To call it First and Second Samuel, that's a Christian thing. For Jews, it's all one book. I always feel bad about it, but it's the thing I'm using. And so just thought I'd highlight for you that that's different for Jews than it is for Christians. And anyway, just so you know. So verse 15, David was in the wilderness of Ziph at Horesh when he learned that Saul had come out to seek his life. Saul's son Jonathan set out and came to David at Horesh. There he strengthened his hand through the Lord. He said to him, and this is Jonathan to David, "Do not be afraid, for the hand of my father Saul shall not find you. You shall be king over Israel, and I shall be second to you. My father Saul also knows that this is so." I think that, sorry, I put my makeup on really fast because I was in a hurry today. And so I look a little crazy. You know, I was trained on the New Testament. Like, I'm not a Hebrew Bible scholar. I know enough to do intros and to do some basic hermeneutics and do some basic stuff but I didn't focus my time in graduate school on the Hebrew Bible. So there's a lot of scholarship out there I've not heard of, much less read. And I'm just very intrigued by this, to say for Jonathan to say that Saul knows that it's not going to be his son who's going to succeed him. He knows it's going to be this guy David. Like, okay, well, we all know that David's already been anointed by now by Samuel, but it's still a little odd. And for Jonathan to say, "I will be second to you." And it does make me think about what kind of pact they've made in the past. And then in verse 18 here, it says, "Then the two of them made a covenant before the Lord." Right? I mean, We've already seen Jonathan remove all his clothes in front of David, and who knows what happened after that. And now they've made a covenant again, some form of pact. David remained at Horesh and Jonathan went home. But, you know, it's just interesting. Okay, I'm going to keep going. We have some more back and forth between David hiding from Saul and Saul trying to find him. I'm going to skip on over to chapter 24. When Saul returned from following the Philistines, and then the Philistines are woven into the story. So it's like they're being distracted by fighting the Philistines, and then they're trying to find each other, and David's trying to flee from Saul, and it's just so unnecessary. But this is in the Bible, so we're reading it. When Saul returned from following the Philistines, he was told, "David is in the wilderness of En-Gedi." Then Saul took 3,000 chosen men out of all Israel, 3,000, and went to look for David and his men in the direction of the rocks of the wild goats. 3,000 men! This is such a waste of energy and distraction. Aren't there better things you could do with your time and energy? Anyway. The rocks of the wild goats. He came to the sheepfolds beside the road, where there was a cave, and Saul went in to relieve himself. Now, David and his men were sitting in the innermost parts of the cave. The men of David said to him, "Here is the day of which the Lord said to you, 'I will give your enemy into your hand, and you shall do to him as it seems good to you.'" Then David went and stealthily cut off a corner of Saul's cloak. Raise your hand if you know what the symbolism is of that. Anyone? I start hung right here. This is really funny to be doing this live, fixing my makeup like that. Okay, so the footnote says, nope, not yet. It hasn't showed up yet. So in the chat. So the footnote suggests that this is essentially symbolic for emasculation or usurpation of Saul's kingdom. Whatever. I find that interesting, cutting off a corner of his cloak. Anyway, that's what it says. So, okay. They say this, today's the day you get to go take down your enemy, basically. And David went and stealthily cut off a corner of Saul's cloak. Afterward, David was stricken to the heart because he had cut off a corner of Saul's cloak, trying to basically tell him, I gotcha, I guess. He said to his men, so David has a conscience? He said to his men, "The Lord forbid that I should do this thing to my Lord, my master, the Lord's anointed, to raise my hand against him, for he is the Lord's anointed." That's why you don't raise your hand against him. He's the Lord's anointed, not just because it's just not a good idea. Like killing is normal and you have to justify not to? Okay. Mm-hmm. So David scolded his men severely and did not permit them to attack Saul. Then Saul got up and left the cave and went on his way. Afterwards, David also rose up and went out of the cave and called after Saul, "My lord the king." When Saul looked behind him, David bowed with his face to the ground, and did obeisance. David said to Saul, "Why do you listen to the words of those who say, 'David seeks to do you harm'? This very day your eyes have seen how the Lord gave you into my hand in the cave. And some urged me to kill you, but I spared you. I said, 'I will not raise my hand against the Lord, for he is the Lord's anointed.'" Excuse me, against my Lord, my master, for he is the Lord's anointed. "See, my father, see the corner of your cloak in my hand." He calls him his father. It's kind of more of a general kindness, "For by the fact that I cut off the corner of your cloak and did not kill you, you may know for certain that there is no wrong or treason in my hands." So funny, right? I mean, of course, he could have killed him and he didn't, but what he did do was still some form of neener, 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 right? Right? Um, I have not sinned against you, though you were hunting me to take my life. May the Lord judge between me and you. May the Lord avenge me on you. Yeah, no wrong or treason here. But my hand shall not be against you. As the ancient proverb says, isn't that fun when they sometimes when they say that? Out of the wicked comes forth wickedness. Super clever. I mean, anyway, but my hand shall not be against you. Against whom has the king of Israel come out? Whom do you pursue? A dead dog? A single flea? I find that just such an odd, I've tried to figure this out and I'm like, I'll just keep moving, but I find that an odd thing to say. May the Lord therefore be the judge and give sentence between me and you. May he see to it and plead my cause and vindicate me against you. When David had finished speaking these words to Saul, Saul said, Is this your voice, my son David? Saul lifted up his voice and wept. He said to David, You are more righteous than I, for you have repaid me good, whereas I have repaid you evil. Today, you have explained how you've dealt well with me, and that you did not kill me when the Lord put me into your hands. I mean, if this were any two other people, right? This would just be utter nonsense. Right. You've done me a favor. The Lord gave me into your hands, and you did not kill me. What in the world? You have repaid me good, whereas I've repaid you evil. Today you've explained how you dealt well with me, in that you did not kill me when the Lord put me into your hands. For who has ever found an enemy and sent the enemy safely away? Why are they enemies to begin with? Rah! So may the Lord reward you with good for what you have done to me this day. Now I know that you shall surely be king, and that the kingdom of Israel shall be established in your hand. Swear to me, therefore, by the Lord, that you will not cut off my descendants after me, and that you will not wipe out my name from my father's house. So David swore this to Saul. Then Saul went home, but David and his men went up to the stronghold. Oh, interesting. I'm sorry. I'm reading comments. I'm trying to figure out. Yeah, I didn't quite understand the single flea thing either, Carrie Ann. So interesting. So you can snap it. Okay. Interesting. All right. Now, after this, I was just seeing if. Yes, it is interesting. This cutting off language, right? The cut off. That's a great point, Moon Pearl. Don't cut off my descendants, even though you've done the symbolic cutting off of the corner of my cloak, right? Yeah, the usurpation of his position does not necessarily mean the destruction of his family, I guess, right? Or it doesn't need to, although in biblical times it tends to go down that way, doesn't it? Everybody's destroyed, or anyway. So this is the story that involves Abigail. And so we've just led up to it here. Now Samuel died, and Samuel was the guy who this book is named after. He's the son of Hannah, and Hannah was the woman at the beginning of the story who was never able to conceive, and she's crying in the temple and blah, blah, blah. Okay. And women are repeatedly told that they have found favor with the Lord, and then they get prego. So that's that's the way God establishes God's favor with women, is to allow them to get pregnant. Okay, so Samuel died, and all Israel assembled and mourned for him. They buried him at his home in Ramah. Then David got up and went down to the wilderness of Paran. There was a man in Ma'on, whose property was in Carmel. The man was very rich, and he had 3,000 sheep and 1,000 goats. He was shearing his sheep in Carmel. Now, the name of the man was Nabal, and the name of his woman, my English says wife, name of his woman, Abigail. The woman was clever and beautiful. This is one of those interesting moments where if I were to pull up the Hebrew, it would say his woman Abigail, and the woman was clever and beautiful. But the English translation committee turned one of those Isha into wife, and the other Isha into woman, because we have to talk about people this way. The woman was clever and beautiful, but the man was surly and mean. He was a Calebite. Caleb. Dog. Red dog. Something. David heard in the wilderness that Nabal was shearing his sheep. So David sent 10 young men. And David said to the young men, "Go up to Carmel and go to Nabal and greet him in my name. Thus you shall salute him. Peace be to you, and peace be to your house, and peace be to all that you have. I hear that you have shearers. Now your shepherds have been with us, and we did them no harm, and they missed nothing all the time they were in Carmel. Ask your young men, and they will tell you. Therefore, let my young men find favor in your sight, for we have come on a feast day. Please give whatever you have at hand to your servants," and it's actually slaves in the Hebrew, "and to your son David." Again, I just need to point out that people want to be given favors just for being human and humane. Like, we didn't ever harm them. I mean, how bloodthirsty are these people that you literally feel like you need a sucker, a lollipop, for not harming people? Like, what is going on? What was your childhood like that you think that deserves a trophy? It just drives me crazy. I'm guessing I'm not the only one, right? Okay. So when David's young men came, they said all this to Nabal in the name of David, and then they waited. But Nabal answered David's servants, David's slaves, "Who's David? Who is the son of Jesse? There are many slaves today who are breaking away from their masters. Shall I take my bread and my water and the meat that I have butchered for my shearers and give it to men who come from I do not know where?" I mean, in Nabal's defense, he might not have any clue who David is, right? I mean, just because David's a big shot doesn't mean that everybody in the land knows who he is. I'm just saying. So David's young men turned away and came back and told him all this. David said to his men, "Every man strap on his sword." Oh, it's like, give me a reason to go to battle. And every one of them strapped on his sword. David also strapped on his sword. He's going to go with him this time. And about 400 men went up after David, while 200 remained with the baggage. But one of the young men told Abigail, Nabal's woman, my English says wife, "David sent messengers out of the wilderness to salute your master or your lord, and he shouted insults at them. Yet the men were very good to us, and we suffered no harm, and we never missed anything when we were in the fields, as long as we were with them. They were a wall to us, both by night and by day, all the while we were with them keeping the sheep. Now, therefore, know this and consider what you should do. For evil has been decided against our master and against all this house. He is so ill natured that no one can speak to him. Those are good servants. Those are good people who are, I mean, they're afraid for their lives too, but all right. Then Abigail hurried and took 200 because she just had this on hand. This is impressive, right? She took 200 loaves, 2 skins of wine, 5 sheep ready dressed, 5 measures of parched grain, 100 clusters of raisins, and 200 cakes of figs. That's a lot. I'm sure she has a lot of help in the house making all that happen, right? She loaded them on donkeys and said to her young men, "Go on ahead of me. I'm coming after you." But she did not tell her man, my English says husband, she did not tell her man Nabal. As she rode on the donkey and came down under cover of the mountain, David and his men came down toward her, and she met them. Now, David had said, "Surely it was in vain that I protected all that this fellow has in the wilderness, so that nothing was missed of all that belonged to him. But he has returned me evil for good. God do so to David and more also, if by morning I leave so much as one male of all who belong to him." I mean, I do find this a really interesting element of their thinking, right? This issue of all the men are involved in all the fighting, right? Now, don't get me wrong, obviously protecting women and children is nice and all, but but the flip of that, right? The incredible pressure and just unnecessary ick. I don't even know. It just just such constant threats to your life. How do you survive that? Like you have to be messed up from that, right? You if you are constantly living that way, and there is a parallel to today's realities and current events in that part of the world, right? That that messes you up to be in that kind of constant believing that you're in that kind of constant threat, right? You thought God hates figs? That was fun. That was a good one. Thank you for that. It's fun little. Uh-huh, uh-huh. All right, these are they do not inspire you? This is so funny. That's why it's part of why I'm doing this, right? This isn't inspiring stuff, right? So I'm just sharing this. I was reading the comment. They are pompous and exaggerated. Something feels less and are creating a history that makes them more important. Yeah, they don't inspire me either, Carrie Ann. It's I'm just yeah, I'm kind of trying to highlight how ridiculous this stuff is. Some of this stuff is, right? Okay, so he's made this thing. He's made this proclamation. He's going to kill everybody by morning, right? When Abigail saw David, she hurried and alighted from the donkey and fell before David on her face, bowing to the ground. She fell at his feet and said, "Upon me alone, my lord, be the guilt. Please let your servant, your slave, speak in your ears and hear the words of your servant." I mean, she's kind of seducing him, right? "My lord, do not take seriously this ill-natured fellow Nabal, for as his name is, so is he." Nabal means fool. Nabal is his name, and folly is with him. But I, your slave, your servant, did not see the young men of my master whom you sent. Now then, my lord, as the Lord lives, and as you yourself live, since the Lord has restrained you from blood guilt — it's an interesting way of putting it, right? and from taking vengeance with your own hand. Now let your enemies and those who seek to do evil to my Lord be like Nabal. And now let this present that your servant has brought to my Lord. I mean, I can't track with all the speaking of yourself in third person and all this stuff. It's a little bit much, but okay. Now let this present that your servant has brought to my Lord be given to the young men who follow my Lord. Please forgive the trespass of your servant, for the Lord will certainly make my Lord a sure house. You all can't tell that which ones are the four, small caps, and then which one is just the master Lord. But for God will certainly make my master a sure house, because my master is fighting the battles of God. And evil shall not be found in you so long as you live. What? Evil shall not be found in you so long as you live? That's hilarious, right? Like, what? She's really, really buttering him up. If anyone should rise up to pursue you and to seek your life, the life of my master shall be bound in the bundle of the living under the care of the Lord your God. But the lives of your enemies he shall sling out as from the hollow of a sling. When the Lord has done, when God, the Lord God, has done to my master according to all the good he has spoken concerning you, and has appointed you prince over Israel, my Lord shall have no cause of grief or pangs of conscience for having shed blood without cause or for having saved himself. And when God has dealt well with my Lord, my master, then remember your servant. It's really, really, really interesting claims and assertions here. But she's speaking his language, right? She is ringing his bell in more than one way. David said to Abigail, "Blessed be God, the God of Israel, who sent you to meet me today." Blessed be your good sense, and blessed be you who have kept me today from blood guilt and from avenging myself by my own hand. For as surely as the Lord, the God of Israel, lives, who has restrained me from hurting you, God has restrained me from hurting you, not Abigail herself, right? Okay, whatever. I mean, I like for the credit to go where credit's due. You know what I'm saying? For surely as the Lord, God of Israel, lives, who has restrained me from hurting you, unless you had hurried and come to meet me, truly by morning, there would not have been left to Nabal so much as one male. Then David received from her hand what she had brought him. He said to her, "Go up to your house in peace. See, I have heeded your voice, and I have granted your petition." Abigail came to Nabal. He was holding a feast in his house, like the feast of a king. Nabal's heart was merry within him, for he was very drunk. So she told him nothing at all until the morning light. In the morning, when the wine had gone out of Nabal, his wife told him these things, and his heart died within him. He became like a stone. About 10 days later, the Lord struck Nabal and he died. I really, really, really find it humorous and awful all at the same time, the way everybody talks about dying as something that is happening at God's hand. It's just so tragic because so many people believe it still to this day, that every time someone dies, it's God's doing, or God allows it, or something, right? Instead of just knowing that that's a part of life and living on this planet. And so people just aren't prepared well to handle death and things associated with death. Anyway, we're almost done. So he died because God struck him dead. Right? I mean, I'm sure most of the people watching here now or watching later have heard all the stuff, right? All the comments about people not knowing how to talk in a normal way about death and in a comforting way or supportive way, because people are fed this weird idea that every single time a person dies, it's God's doing. So we have to, and you can't be angry at God for taking, for killing your loved one. You can't be angry with God, right? So you have to find a different way of handling it. And people come up with just ridiculous ways of making sense of it. God needed another angel in heaven. I mean, you all know. There's we could probably have a long list, right, of things that people say to somehow get around being angry that this has happened, because it's, I think it's normal to be angry and upset and sad and all the things when you lose a loved one. Okay, stick to the text. All right. All right. When David heard that Nabal was dead, he said, "Blessed." Praise Jesus. Oh, sorry, this isn't Jesus. This is God. Okay. Blessed be the Lord who has judged the case of Nabal's insult to me and has kept back his servant from evil. The Lord has returned the evil doing of Nabal upon his own head. Celebrating the death of someone you didn't like. Then David sent and wooed Abigail to make her his woman, my English says wife. So there's actually a form of wooing taking place here. Wow, look at that. When David's servants came to Abigail at Carmel, they said to her, "David has sent us to you to take you to him as his woman," my English says wife. Well, that's not exactly wooing, but anyway, okay. Oh, that's what they mean by wooing. Yeah. Yeah, okay. Now I get it. She rose and bowed down with her face to the ground and said, "Your servant, your slave, is a slave to wash the feet of the servants of my Lord." I don't like this talking about yourself in third person and who's your Lord? It just drives me crazy. I'm sorry. I'm having a bad day today. Your servant, I, is a slave to wash the feet of the servants of my Lord. Abigail got up hurriedly and rode away on a donkey. Her 5 maids attended her. She went after the messengers of David and became his woman, my English says wife. David also took Ahinoam of Jezreel, my English says married. He also took, it's right, I looked up the Hebrew just to make sure. He also took Ahinoam of Jezreel. Both of them became his women, my English says wife. Saul had given his daughter Michal, to David's woman, my English says wife, to Palti, son of Laish, who was from Galim. We have, okay, hang on just a second. Okay, so on Tuesday, let's see. I think it's in the chapter on cover-ups and edited stories. Let's see. Yes. So my second book, permission granted, take the Bible into your own hands. The chapter 5 is called Cover-ups and Edited Stories. So this is a lot of the, the first one is Exodus, freedom at what cost, and the part that people focus on is the freedom, and we forget to take into consideration that whole slaughter and destruction of hundreds of thousands of Egyptians in that story. So yeah, you're celebrating your freedom, but you're also celebrating the demise of people every single year. Like a little awkward. Parts about David's story that fall into this. David and Goliath, actually. And I referred to this when I read through the story, the juicy version, the interesting version, the one that people have tattooed on their bodies. Did you know? Anyway, there's a chart called Who Killed Goliath? There are 3 different references to Goliath's death or a man who might be Goliath. So I just thought I would share this with you all because I thought it was worth noting. And someone had pointed out, I think watching it later, so not in the live chats, but in the comments, that something to this effect. So I thought I'd just share it with you. So the version I read on Tuesday, 1 Samuel 17, verses 4 to 11. So in this version of the story, which most people are familiar with, Goliath of Gath, whose height was 6 cubits and a span, is the only giant mentioned. His armor is described. The spear, like a weaver's beam, is his, and the head of the spear is 600 shekels of iron. Goliath is clearly the one taunting Israel. David is the one to kill him. Now, in 2 Samuel, so the second half of that book for Jews, and in the second Samuel for Christians, chapter 21, verses 15 to 22. In this version of the story, it is Ishbibinab. I can't remember where the emphasis goes. Ishbibinab's spear, whose weight is given, and it is 300 shekels of bronze instead of 600 of iron. He is also the giant to threaten David's life. Abishai, not David, kills him. It is Elhanan who kills Goliath the Gittite, which is similar to Gath, whose spear was like a weaver's beam. Jonathan killed the giant who was said to have taunted Israel. This giant is unnamed, but is noted to have had 6 fingers on each hand and 6 toes on each foot. There are 4 giants total, named and killed in this version, but David kills none of them. Dun, dun, dun. And then the third version is in 1 Chronicles chapter 20, verses 4 to 8. Here, Elhanan kills Lahmi, the brother of Goliath. One of them, Lahmi or Goliath, it's not clear which, had a spear like a weaver's beam. Another giant is noted to be 6-toed and 6-fingered, and he is the one who taunted Israel. Jonathan is said to have killed this giant. It is not clear that Goliath is even killed, though it may be implied that Jonathan kills him. So just a really interesting, an example of, an idea is out there, a story is out there, and people retell it or remember the details differently or whatever, tweak it a little bit. But no question, that was unsettling for me when I first discovered that in seminary, right? That, what do you mean David maybe isn't the one who killed Goliath? Like, of course he did. It's David and Goliath. It's right there. Yeah, it's propaganda, and it works well, right? It has worked well for thousands of years. Apologetics, yes, and also we're gonna. There were some pretty big guys over there in the Philistines, and we're gonna pull it all together and use it to back our guy David, right? He's it's like an origin story, right? You have these elements of you only tell something about a person's birth if there was something auspicious about their birth, or you make up that there was something auspicious about their birth to retroactively justify that this was a great person, right? It's just, that kind of happens with the guy Jesus in the Newer Testament too, right? The first version of his life is they don't even mess around with his birth. It's just starting with his mission, right? At 30-ish, whatever, right? That's what matters. This is a story they're trying to tell. It's about this guy who's trying to take it to the man down in Jerusalem, right? who's colliding with Rome. So that's the part that matters. And then they realize, oh, well, we got to make sure we say something about his birth since he's, so it kind of works in that kind of a way. So yeah, there's spin in the Bible for sure. All right. That's it for today. Thanks for being here. Yeah. Okay, this is interesting. I'm going to share this because first of all, I want to read the whole comment. And then if anyone has any connections, that's interesting. Okay. Ex-Mormon podcasters about how biblical marriage variants led to Mormon polygamy and its ongoing practice in fundamentalist groups. That's an interesting suggestion. Someone else said, I had asked a couple weeks ago and actually, let me just pose it here, actually. If you know of someone who has, I don't know, do people read blogs anymore? Do people even blog at this point? I don't think so. Not that I know of. I don't do much reading of blogs because I don't have time. But if you know someone who has a podcast, who might be interested in the ideas I'm talking about, and I'm thinking specifically about my book, Marriage in the Bible, What Do the Texts Say? If you know someone who runs a podcast, or if you are someone who runs a podcast and you'd like to have a conversation about my forthcoming book, or if you could connect me with someone who does, that you think might like the content, might like the ideas, please let me know. I mean, I'm just going to be real honest and direct here, right? I'm looking for places to do that, to have conversations. I have a few interviews lined up, the usuals, and yeah. Also, if any of you have connections on maybe even a bigger platform in terms of TV, or I'm trying to find my I have some connections to people like at NPR. I'd love for Terry Gross to take a look at my book. I'm working on that, but I could always use some help with some of that. If anyone here has, oh my gosh, I just saw a comment about Nabal's death. I will put that up here in just a second. So anyway, it doesn't hurt to ask, right? If you have any connections that you would like to extend my way, I would be grateful, because I think this is the most important thing I will publish in my career, is this book on marriage. And I would like to do everything I can to get it a wide audience. So okay. This is the funny thing. I wanted to. It's really funny. Okay, this is share where those interviews conversation happen. Oh, I will. I definitely will. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. It didn't occur to me to do that kind of that's where I could share it. So thanks for that, Doc. I think you're a doctor also, aren't you, Mr. Nieberg? Bill Reel. And yeah, so I don't have, I would love connections. So if you know, are you able to connect me? I do cold calls all the time. They just don't tend to respond to those, I don't mind doing it, but it helps if you can help me with an in. So anyway, that's out there. I am taking next week off entirely from work. Yay. And so I will be back on, I think Halloween is Tuesday. Yeah. Yeah. So I'm not sure what story is next, but I'll line that up before I go. So anyway, thanks for being here. Thanks for being here live. Those of you who are able to and want to. Let me put this up. There's a community of us here with smaller channels. I'd love to get you connected with us. Is email the best way to contact you? Yes. It actually helps if you go through if you don't mind going through my website and the info there. So just go to, I'll go ahead and put it in, because it comes to me differently that way. JenniferGraceBird.com. Yeah. So thank you all. Thank you all. Thank you for the super chat. Hunter Biden's laptops. Lovely. Thank you. I look forward to more in a couple weeks. Thanks for being here or for watching later.